One of the things you stressed was the importance of not trying to do everything at once.
Mhm.
That the first year you wanted 2, maybe 3 meaningful agenda items, get those through. Second year, same thing. The things that you mentioned here are comparable to Bradley Burns' 3 E's, ethics, economics, and education. The issue with any sort of reform, things like that, is getting it through the legislature.
Mhm.
And so you talked about building coalitions, forming a conversation across party and interest group lines. How exactly are you going to, when you start that, how do you think that process is going to work
Two things.
after a governor's race that is going to be real interesting?
Sure. 2 things. Number one, I think Jim Folsom and I can do it together. If I win, I will ask Jim Folsom to be a first officer. I will ask him to be someone who has a significant amount of responsibility. I will ask him to work closely with me in dealing with the Alabama legislature. And though we don't elect governors and lieutenant governors as a team, I'm going to ask him to run with me as a team. It's up to him after the nomination, obviously. It's up to him whether or not he accepts that, but I will certainly make the offer. And if we both win, I will ask him to help me govern as a team. And I will ask him to be my lead liaison, if you will, in dealing with the Alabama legislature. That's important. He has relationships there with both the House and Senate. And in terms of priorities, I absolutely agree, as I've said before, that you have to make sure there's not too much traffic on the train at one time. We're going to begin, obviously, with a budget process. I expect that Governor Riley will declare proration in all likelihood one more time before he leaves office at the end of 2010. It's not uncommon for outgoing governors to declare proration. I suspect he will do the same. And frankly, the stimulus money will have run out. Much of it will have run out by the end of that fiscal year. And right off the bat, I'm going to have to craft a budget that is fiscally responsible and meets the basic obligations that we have as a state, and frankly in some areas strengthens obligations and strengthens programs like the Alabama Reading Initiative, which has worked very well at the elementary level, now needs to be expanded into junior high school across the entire state. So the first part of my governorship is going to be focused on building and crafting a budget, and a budget that makes the right, responsible choices. After the legislative session ends, and after we have an education budget and a general fund budget, I'm going to call the legislature right back into session to have a special session devoted to ethics and reform. And I'm going to ask them to pass what I think is the strongest ethics package that's ever even been debated in the state of Alabama. You've written about it extensively, but I'll just summarize it. Ban on gift giving by lobbyists, no $250 exception, no exception for football games, no exception for movies, no exceptions for meals. Second of all, we want to ban legislators using their discretionary budget to benefit their employers, whoever their employer may be. Third of all, we want to have more transparency than we've ever had by not just banning back-to-back transfers, but by having stronger disclosure reports around PACs, and by also, for the first time, imposing limits on contributions to Alabama campaigns. Now, this campaign, I'm going to play into the rules that exist because my opponents are going to do that. But in my opinion, we ought to put caps on contributions in the state of Alabama. The Wild West rules we have, as much as possible, unlimited amounts, no practical limits. We need to move past that to a system of reasonable limits put in place. That's what happens at the presidential level and the federal level. We need limits in place in Alabama. We can debate what those limits are, whether it should be $10,000 per cycle per individual or $5,000. I'm open to argument there, but we need to have limits in place to take the huge checks that sometimes dominate Alabama politics out of play and to move away from a world where a few people can literally buy their way into influencing the system. And fourth of all, and in some circles most controversially, if you get indicted for violating state ethics law or for violating federal corruption law, you're suspended. That sounds harsh to politicians, but it does not sound harsh to people who are watching this blog or people who are paying attention to this race who know that if their employee got indicted for stealing from the company, they put that person on administrative leave, or God forbid, if they got charged for any kind of misconduct connected to their job. They'd be put on administrative leave. You have a presumption of innocence, but you don't have a presumption to be a politician. You have a presumption to hold your political office. And I think suspending elected officials who were under indictment for violating their oath of office, in my opinion, is no different from putting an average citizen on administrative leave. It doesn't presume their guilt. It just simply says you have more important matters to deal with right now, and there should be no question around how you're using and conducting the public trust day in and day out. And there are some other things that we'll also do. You know, we certainly want to make the ban on gift giving extend to the entire political structure. Governor's office, cabinet, legislature. Governor Riley's been resistant to doing that at times. But put all these things together in tandem, and it's the strongest ethics package that's ever been considered. We're going to ask the legislature to implement that in a special session. If I'm successful, and we'll travel around the state to build a case, to try to build a consensus that we need this kind of reform, if I'm successful, that I think will create a significant amount of momentum going into year 2. And in year 2, 2011, the focus is going to be education reform. We're going to try to get the funding structure closer to where it needs to be in 10, but in 11, the focus of that legislative session, in my opinion, is going to be real reform for our schools. Frankly, that does mean making it easier to get rid of that very small number of teachers who are incompetent, but more importantly, it means making it easier to get teachers who are young professionals who don't want a teaching career, but who just want to teach for a few years into the system. I want to create a K through 20 council. That's become, frankly, a common thing in many states around the country. But I want to create a council, a pre-K through 20 council actually, that focuses on a strategy from pre-K all the way through K through 12, all the way through higher education, and a pre-K through 20 governing council would be a good step for Alabama. I want to make a commitment to research and a commitment to strengthening the research arm of our institutions. And I want to break down this artificial choice between K through 12 and higher education. So that's going to be the focus, frankly, of 2011.